have we got? Yes, we have the quorum. So this brings us now to item. Oh, just by the way, we're aiming for lunch from 1 till 2, and at which point we'll go into PX just before lunch, and we've got the PX at 2 o'clock. All going well. So item 13, the final instalment of the Cathedral Reinstatement grant. I'll just point out to councillors that this is a noting report, and pardon. Oh, Councillor Scandrus moved it, seconded Councillor MacDonald, thank you. Staff have the delegation to distribute this money, provided all the boxes have been ticked, and the report is quite clear that it has. And this was a decision made earlier on, and the money is there to be distributed, so it's a noting report. So it's been moved and seconded. Are there some questions? Right, I'll have to ask staff to come to the table, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question around the project as a whole. So I know that various organisations have come to us in the recent past when they've had cost concerns and have needed additional funding for whatever reason. So I'm thinking Ferrymead, Orana, Arts Centre, those kind of organisations. And as part of future funding for them, so not things that had already been decided, we have asked for independent reviews to be done to make sure that any money that we do give them is going to be spent in a really efficient and effective kind of way, that the structures are right in place and those kind of things. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to get that kind of oversight and transparency for large amounts of public money that go into this project as well.
Yeah, so we are planning a workshop with Christchurch Cathedral Reinstatement Limited in the next couple of weeks. So they will be before councillors, and they will be able to answer those questions around the future parts of the project.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm concerned about is, so we know because they've come and talked to us already that they need quite a lot more money to be able to complete the project. And if the $7 million that we're about to give them goes into the project and the construction now, and no future funds are found, then that $7 million is effectively wasted. And I'm really concerned about the really wise spend of ratepayers' money. I don't object. I mean,
sorry, can I just interrupt, Sarah, because I think using that comment effectively wasted might not be quite true. We'd have to get that response from the board itself. The report does say they are using that money for construction and carrying on.
Yeah, so I agree.
I don't know if we can just assume
if
that.
the $7 million is spent, so I was just asking a question.
Yeah.
And if the $7 million is spent and then the project is mothballed, then that money just kind of sits actually not being effective for a long time. Do we have any idea of when the government is going to make its decision over whether it grants any funding for the completion of the restoration?
Just if I, through you, Madam Chair, it seems two parts. We did explore before we said the payment should be approved, that about whether or not the funding, what would happen to the funding in the event that the project wasn't progressed. And they have assured us that this funding, if the additional funding they require, they can't get it all, and they have given to us the assurance, and it's in the report, that it will be used to strengthen the building and so on. So I don't think it is going to effectively be not used appropriately. It will be used in a way that ensures the fabric of the building is strengthened. In terms of where they are with government, I think that's a question that they'll be better able to answer when they come and talk to us.
Can I just say I don't think that's relevant to this report, because this money is actually an agreement, a previous resolution that was in hand with the government funding at that time.
I
they
agree.
put in the 25 and we put in the 10. So we're effectively honouring our agreement to fund this money to
Thanks,
the
Chair.
cathedral.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay it. Okay, I'm asking questions around
Yeah,
how
I'm just saying I don't think the government
How we do
funding
that.
is relevant.
Okay.
Is any other question?
Yeah, so how much of the $10 million have we collected so far? And if we haven't collected the full amount, will we have to borrow to do this instalment?
Through you, Madam Chair. So look, yes, we started collecting it from the 2018, and to date we've collected 6.5 million, and it's not a precise sum, but it's in that order because, of course, we're partway through a year. But we've collected that amount. There's been around about $500,000 of interest earned on that sum, if you like. So we don't. Of course, it's not. Money isn't treated in a project way, it's treated in a treasury way. But if we were to segregate that money, we've got about 6.5 in. It's got about 500,000 of interest. We dispersed in December the first payment of about 3 million, which leaves sort of in the order of, sort of 4 million odd. And with the balance that would be borrowed, if you like, or drawn on in advance, the interest that would be paid on that will be roughly the same, slightly more, slightly less than the 500 of interest that has been collected.
That's good to know.
So it comes out in the wash.
Pretty much it comes out in the wash, more or less. I mean, there'd be some roundings, but it's pretty much the same.
Okay, can I just I seek to put an amendment in that, or an additional resolution, depending on the mover and seconder, that that council notes that any future funding request from the Cathedral Reinstatement Trust would be contingent on an independent review and greater transparency.
Just so offensive, the framing of that.
We normally do those reviews if there is a
What's the
a
greater
reason.
transparency that they want?
I think maybe
the
put it as
cathedral
an
would be very
amendment.
open.
How does the mover feel?
Just like,
as
if
I
I-
wasn't
can I just, what's happened is that the cost has more than doubled, and at times with other organisations when they have
No,
run
look, this
financial
debate, but you're entitled to
difficulties.
put your amendment with, you can insert it into the recommendation with the will of the mover. If the mover doesn't want that, it's an amendment.
Okay, that's fine.
If they come back to ask for more money, that's a process. Then I'm not supportive.
So use it as an
changing this.
amendment.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
you
agree.
can put it up as an
It's
amendment.
not the purpose of this paper.
So, question Councillor Harrison Hunt?
It's actually been answered.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McDonald, did you have a question?
No, it was just to get really clear in my mind, because the concern, I think, the public commentary has been around potentially borrowing to finalise what was agreed well before either of us were even around the council table. But what you were saying is that fundamentally the interest we've collected on the rate we've collected before we've paid it out is enough to balance out what we would be borrowing. So it's effectively cost neutral, but allows for the cathedral to get on with some more strengthening at this point in time.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's essentially correct on
Yeah.
on the cash flow, Councillor McDonald.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. No,
And I think it's also worth noting, because there's been some misinformation through the letters to the paper that I've read, that this is not an extra $7 million. This is part of the agreed $10 million that we had an agreement with the Cathedral Restoration Group. We are now honouring that agreement that we made. So it's not any additional money. It goes back to the 2017-18 decision. Councillor Johansson?
Thanks. Two questions. One is, I was wondering why it took so long to sign a funding agreement, given that we passed the resolution in 2017 and the funding agreement was only signed in 2023.
So the council resolution was that the grant that council would provide would be expended when other funds had run out. So funds from the church, funds from the government, funds from other funders. They came to that point in December. They came to us and let us know. Well, November they came to us and let us know, and so that's why it was December funding agreement, and that's why the first part of the grant was paid for. That was always anticipated. If you look back at the LTPs 2018, 2021, 2024, the amount was always budgeted to be spent this financial year.
Right. And the other thing is just interested in whether there's been any discussion about if you look at the hearings and the submitters, there was concern raised around what would happen if there was a delay or the project didn't have sufficient budget. Was there anything in the funding agreement that protects us against that risk? And if so, how? Or if not, why not?
The original decision was to provide a grant towards the reinstatement project. There's no definition of what completion of reinstatement looks like. So the grant is being used for the purpose that it was granted for. So it was going towards the reinstatement of the cathedral project.
The only thing in there is that if they don't need all the money, it goes to a heritage project. So, Councillor Templeton, you have one more question?
Yeah, just based on the comment there, you know, once the insurance proceeds and things had been applied, my understanding is that the church and the government came to an agreement that $10 million of the insurance proceeds for the cathedral would be withheld to pay for future maintenance and those kind of things. Is that right?
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Yeah, I think we'd heard that in a
Might
previous
have been
briefing
good to
from the
have those
church.
questions put through, but I don't
Yeah, I
think
think
that
if we
they're
could,
relevant
we'd
to
clarify
this
that at some
decision,
point.
this noting report. So we've
Those
got,
can be asked when we have the meeting.
we've got
with
the
them.
amendment up, so we'll put the amendment first. Okay, so the amendment is: note that any future funding requests from the Christchurch Cathedral Reinstatement Limited would be contingent upon independent review. Do you have a seconder? And Councillor Moore? Yes.
Are they wanting to put ratepayer money into an independent review of a? Because I mean, what I'm trying to understand is if it's even in order, because haven't we struck a rate which is maybe I've missed something because it was pre my time, but I thought we struck a fixed rate, and wouldn't we any future funding decisions be considered at that point in time? How can we bind something we don't know is coming into? We haven't had a request for more money.
There's debate.
Okay, but that
No, it's a question on an amendment I don't think can be put. So I'd quite like some advice on that, because I don't think that's consistent with our standing orders. It can't be put. We haven't had a funding request.
and we may not have a funding.
Yeah.
I think it might be outside the scope of what this report's about, but I'll just
Thank you.
quickly do.
Just take 5, everybody. If this was to occur, this would happen at the time. So thank you. Okay, so look, I'm not going to encourage debate on it's a noting report. So I'd really like to just put the motion. That's the original motion without the amendment. Just noting that this funding will be released in staff delegation, and this is a report for transparency. All those in favour say aye.
It's me. I'd like to debate.
And if there is a debate, I'd like the right to finish it.
We have to have debate on noting report.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks. The Anglican Church originally estimated that the rebuild, a full restoration of the cathedral would be $221 million. And so we're quite keen to have a cheaper, more modern rebuild at around 60 to 70 million. However, at the time, and this has been well traversed, lots of legal challenges, those kind of things. And so it was the national government who commissioned the report that said it could be done for $105 million, although that might be tricky and risky. It was also the national government that brokered the deal to get ratepayer funding towards the restoration on top of its own contribution. And those contributions are well traversed, they were democratically done, and I don't want to revisit those. The Synod only agreed to restore the cathedral due to that funding contribution and the government intervention. And this puts the church and the city at a really tough place, and I don't envy the Trust, whose job it is to get the restoration done. But we've not yet heard about any potential government contribution to the latest substantial shortfall, and as a council we've not yet been formally approached for a contribution on top of the $10 million already decided. If August is the deadline for an additional $30 million, which is what we've been told, and we'd still have to consult, it's been cut really fine. I'm really wary of handing over another $7 million of the residents' money when we're not quite sure of the outcome yet. Even if the money is spent on actual restoration, which I am sure it will be, if further money isn't found, then that $7 million sits there in a mothballed building for who knows how long. At this stage, I'd really rather it was held until we had certainty of the project going ahead. Many of the organisations that have come to us over the last year or two have had financial struggles, and as a condition of funding them due to those struggles, we have had some quite substantial sort of guidance asked for, so reports written, those kind of things, to make sure that any money that we do put in is well spent. And I'd like to think that should a funding request come to council, that we will do the same. The reason I had started the process today, or tried to, was because the timing is going to be really tight. If we're asked for money, we are bound to be given a deadline for that, and to have an independent review of some sort done in time for a decision on the funding as well as the consultation, I think would be an enormous stretch, and I wouldn't be surprised if the lack of timing is given as an excuse not to do a review. So I'm wary. I do think that, given the fact that we decided democratically to do $10 million, that it should go towards the restoration. I just think that we should be holding off for now until we have certainty of the government contribution before we make the payment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, I think we should be really careful to not conflate a couple of issues here. And the first point I'd make is that the amendment put doesn't actually address what's just been debated. That is a noting provision around an independent review. So let's be very clear, that would not speed up any process around future funding. I think the reality is, and again, I wasn't here, and the majority of us probably weren't at the time around the funding, but the decision was made by a previous council that we have gone out and rated for. So I just would caution anyone on conflating the two issues. This is, if there was concern at the time that actually this money shouldn't be passed on, that it's been rated for, and we've heard about the different interest mechanisms, then the council of the time, and again, I don't know who was here, but there may be some, should have put in place appropriate decision-making ability, not to have a delegation with the chief executive. The reality is, I think the organisation has been very transparent. This paper didn't need to come to council. There is delegation which was agreed upon at the time, but instead the chief executive has chosen to be very public about this so that people know what is happening, and I think that's a very good thing. So I just would caution anyone to conflate the two issues. This is about an agreed-upon process and releasing funds to hopefully help the cathedral complete itself. Personally, I think if we didn't do this today, we might as well get the scaffolding out now and lock the place up. Imagine the signal that would send to Wellington that we don't even have confidence in good people like Brian Pearson and Mark Stewart and the team that are running it to actually deliver this project. Future funding will be future funding, but we shouldn't conflate the issues. This is a process thing that the chief executive has been very transparent about by bringing to the council table when actually they didn't need to. If there was a concern at the time this was struck, councillors of the day should have put amendments up to change the delegations, and clearly they didn't.
Thank you. Councillor Johansson?
Look, I appreciate we are today where we are in terms of the process, and that we do not have the ability to relitigate the financial decision that we made or the funding decision towards the cathedral. Although I do want to just respond to something that one of my colleagues has just raised, because I posed the question during the hearing on the decision around funding and asked for advice on any other resolutions conditions considered by staff in response to concerns made by submitters over cost blowouts, expectations of increased funding from CCC, and significant delays to the project, right? Because we'd actually seen similar things happen in the Turners and Growers site not too long ago, where we had put public funding into a project that just didn't happen for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that this project isn't going to happen, but I do reflect that that question actually was not even answered, not addressed, despite the fact that some of us who were here at the time wanted the advice on that. And so when I read the funding agreement and when I look at these noting provisions, and I do, again, commend staff for bringing us with transparency this information, but I am concerned that we don't seem to be putting in place mechanisms to address concerns that people raise through the process. And I'm concerned that we do ensure that when we're giving significant amounts of funding to groups, that we do have some robust procedures around, or processes and conditions around what happens if there's a delay, what happens if there's a massive increase to the budget. And maybe we need to learn possibly some lessons going forward around that. But today, I obviously appreciate that we cannot make a decision to defund the cathedral. We're just receiving the information. And so, we do have to, I think, receive it and just hopefully reflect and maybe learn some lessons around when we do make these decisions going forward. What are the things we can put in place to give us a bit more confidence that things will happen in a timely manner, or at least have processes by which things can be rediscussed.
Thank you. Councillor Coker.
Well, from what I've seen, the cathedral will be completed. It took 40 years to build it initially, so it may take another 40 years to rebuild it. But we, as leaders of the city, with this building at its heart, with the same name as our city, should be positive about this project, and I don't want to hear negative things about it because it's not helpful. It may hold it up. We don't want to hold up a development that's happening, and we want to say positive things about it so that any potential funders that people are looking for will provide that money. If we say we're not sure about whether we will look at further funding for it or putting through the $7 million for this project, we'll have a broken building in the centre of our city for eternity. It will never be demolished. It will remain like that if it's not fully funded to be repaired. Do we want that? I think no. So please be positive about this project because it is very important.
Well said. I think we need to be ambassadors for our city, and that is in our central city. Look, it's not about whether you agree with the restoration or not. A decision has been made. This is a noting report to honour our agreement that we made with the restoration team in 2018. So to me, it's a signal of good faith, and it's good faith from the Chief Executive to bring this noting report to us as well. It's out in the open. I think the project, the cathedral looks a lot better than it did after the earthquake, and it would still look like that now if they hadn't begun the restoration, because they'd be in court facing a demolition order and facing a lawsuit. So it's a lot better than it was. It's safer. So it is good progress. And I agree with, well said, Melanie, that's really important that we are ambassadors for our city. Get behind it. The decision's been made. Let's go forward and wish them well. Councillor Harrison-Hunt.
Kia ora koutou. I just wanted to rebalance the books a little bit here, and I completely understand the sentiment of Councillor Templeton's alternative, and also at the same time, it's as simple as two things. One of them is act of good faith, of which we agreed to in 2018. The other one is financial pragmatism, of which many of us around the table tend to talk about. Now, I do note that this is a noting arrangement of which we're committing to the funding of the cathedral. The Christchurch City Council logo is literally the spire of the Christchurch Cathedral. It is obviously paramount within the look of our city. It is the main character of around our city, and it's also named after our city, I take it. So therefore, I'm indifferent in this proposal, but I am also understanding of Councillor Templeton's sentiment, and also those ratepayers who did consistently report in the paper about their issues around ratepayer money and putting bad money after good. But in the same light, I'm also seeing the benefits of the cathedral and what it does for our city in terms of so many different things: economic development, tourism, making sure that we're proud of something that we've got here. After a horrendous earthquake, we're seeing that there's a rebuild, and this is the last piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, that needs to be built to make sure that we're continuing to be resilient while also keeping an eye on the past. So happy either way. Kia ora.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. Oh, beg your pardon? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Look, We have an agreement which we've entered into, and I don't think we can renege on it. They have met every benchmark, and imagine the difficulties they have been through restoring a heritage building. If you look at the town hall, you know, there was people there that didn't want to rebuild the town hall. It went over budget, and it was on the most investigated land in Australasia before the build. It was like a cheese factory after all the drilling. But look what we have, and it is busy. Christchurch is the #1 place for students in New Zealand. And why is that? It's because we have wonderful facilities. We have excitement. People want to be here. There are so many people coming to Christchurch because we have all these things, and you have to take risks. There are cathedrals around the world that have taken over 100 years to build. God, we do not want that obviously, but that is for the Anglican Church to deal with. Ironically, the only extra funding we've talked here was possibly the independent review was being called for, and it's insane. Let's let them get on with it, leave them alone to do it. Whether they come back to us for further funding or not is up to them. I was not a fan of the original $10 million, but I recognise we have to, as a city, move forward, and we would still be in court, they would still be in court if they chose to ignore the pressure that was on, and we would be in a worse place as a city. So let's get on with it. Let's support them as much as possible. If they come to us for more money, you can all debate that till the cows come home, but let's not have hypocrisy. Let's just get on to it. Thank
All
you.
those receiving the noting report, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to receiving the noting report, say no. Councillor Moore? Thank you. And have we got Councillor Kewen on there as well?
Yeah, he's on the phone. He's on.
So that's carried.
He's on.
That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now I'm sure we've got something else curly on here. Yes, here we go.